With just 28 games remaining for the season on the Chicago Bulls schedule, and despite adding the great pieces to the roster via the trades that were made before the deadline, time for this new roster to build chemistry and gel together is not really on the Bulls side. Now, I mentioned in my last video, which was the Bulls weekly preview video, the upcoming games for the Bulls, and playing most of them on the road, that those are going to be a challenge. And with the playoff race in the East heating up even further as we near the end of the season, the margin of error for the Bulls in securing a playoff spot is pretty slim. Now, there has been a lot of discussion in both the comments on these videos as well as in the Discord on which starting lineup makes the most sense for the Bulls given the recent acquisitions, and now that Theis has also been available for tonight's game. And that's what I want to talk about in today's video, discussing the starting lineup scenarios that would make the most sense for the Bulls in getting them over the hump to get into the playoffs despite the difficult schedule ahead. So what's going on, everyone? You are listening to Bulls Central here. Hope you're all doing well. Now, a few of you had actually asked me in recent videos, why do the Bulls have to make the playoffs this season? Why not just tank and get a top pick to add an even further young, talented player to the roster? And some others have also asked how exactly these protections on these first round picks for the Bulls that we traded to the Magic for will actually work, because it sounds like there is a misconception that we own the Magic's pick if it falls within the top 4, and that is not the case at all. So I'll explain it as best as I can, but the Bulls do not own any of the Magic's picks. They own their first round pick regardless, meaning the Orlando Magic own their first round pick regardless. Whether it's a number 1 pick or a number 14 pick, that is theirs. They also own the Bulls' first round pick if the Bulls' pick falls outside of the top 4. So let's say the Bulls miss the playoffs, which would make them a lottery team, and let's say for argument's sake they finish with the best record among those who did not make the playoffs, so they would most likely get the number 14 pick in the NBA draft. That's the last pick in the NBA lottery. But if somehow they got incredibly lucky and the ping pong balls bounced their way and ended up falling into the top 4, then would they get to keep their pick? And if that happened, the Magic would get the Bulls' first round pick the following season, which would then be unprotected. If the Bulls finished with the best record among lottery teams, that would give them a 97.6% chance of getting the number 14 pick, which again, this would go to the Magic. They would have a 0.5% chance of getting the number 1 pick, a 0.6% chance of getting the number 2 and number 3 pick, and a 0.7% chance of getting the number 4 pick. Again, all very, very unlikely. So to understand this a little more clearly, if the Bulls' first round pick for this upcoming draft falls between the number 5 and number 30 pick, regardless of where it falls in the first round, that pick would go to the Orlando Magic. If it falls within the top 4, the Bulls would get to keep their pick. The Bulls do not own any of the Magic's picks. The Orlando Magic will have their pick for their first round in 2021 no matter what happens, and then they will also have the Bulls' first round pick again if it falls outside of the top 4. Now, the reason Arturas did this was to ensure that the Bulls have some sort of protection should they miss the playoffs, and then the Bulls would get lucky in the draft lottery and get a top pick, because the last thing you want to do is trade a first round pick thinking you're going to make the playoffs, which in then turn means that your pick would likely be a mid first rounder at best, to then actually missing the playoffs and then having your pick turn into a number 1 pick as a result, and that you've just traded away to another team. Anyway, I know I rambled on a lot about that. Hopefully that makes it a little more clear. This is also why the Bulls should absolutely not tank at this point, because it only stands to benefit the Orlando Magic. The Bulls will not get their first round pick if it's number 5 or higher. So because of that, the Bulls have to ensure that they make the playoffs to make this trade for Vucevic even more worth it by only giving up a mid-first rounder rather than a lottery pick. You want to ensure that these first rounders are less and less valuable for the team that you traded with to maximize the value you got in return for the player that you exchanged those picks for. Now, as it stands right now, the Bulls are 19-25 going into the game tonight against the Warriors. They are 2 games back behind the 8 spot and just 3 games back behind the Hawks for that coveted 6 seed. And the reason I say that spot is now coveted is because that seed ensures you a spot in the playoffs without having to play in the play-in tournament. Seeds 7 through 10 will battle it out in a play-in tournament to determine the top 8 teams for the first round of the playoffs. And as of right now, the Bulls would actually make the play-in tournament since they're sitting 10th in the East and would face the Celtics in the play-in tournament as the 7th seed. So even where the Bulls are at right now, they still have an opportunity to squeak into the playoffs despite being 10th in the East if they could win that play-in game. But like I said, the margin of error here in terms of the number of games left the Bulls can lose in order to secure a spot in the playoffs and not fall into the lottery to give up a higher draft pick that goes to the Magic, the Bulls have to start winning and start winning quickly. Because I don't know about you guys, but I want to see the Bulls get to that 6th seed to ensure a spot in the playoffs without having to face off in a play-in tournament that is a one-game winner advances type series. You can't even really call it a series when it's just one game. And based on the performance on Saturday against the Spurs, and yes, I know this was just their first game with the new players, and the guys haven't had, gotten an opportunity to play with each other really, so I'm not going to read into that game too much. But one thing that was clear from that game, and it was the fact that the starting lineup, although great on offense, is abysmal on defense. When you have Patrick Williams, a 19-year-old rookie, as really your only defender in that unit, that's a problem, and adjustments need to be made. Now, there are a few options that Billy Donovan could work with to really balance out the group right now between starters versus the second unit to ensure there are skilled players on both ends of the floor for both units. I think the most common lineup that makes sense is bringing Theis Young back as a starter and having him play power forward while bringing Lauri Markkanen into the bench and being another scoring threat off the bench. As much as it pains me to say it, but Lauri has just not shown up well recently and isn't deserving of a starting spot, especially when the Bulls need more defense in that first unit. The reason I like this move is because it allows for another defensive big man and playmaker in the Thad to go alongside Vuce, and the second unit would also have some offensive players in Coby White and Lauri Markkanen, while you also have strong defensive players in Troy Brown, Garrett Temple, and Daniel Theis. I mean, the way the current lineup is structured between the starters and the bench, at least what Donovan went with in the game against the Spurs, you have too many offensive players starting. And then off the bench, you have too many defensive players with not enough scoring potential. The other lineup that I like that I hadn't really considered before is actually starting Garrett Temple at the 3 and having Patrick Williams slide to the power forward. Very similar to what the Bulls did when Lauri Markkanen was injured, and that actually proved to be fairly successful. I do think P. Will is better suited to be a power forward for his size and strength and athletic ability. And Garrett Temple, I know he's not flashy and doesn't fill the stat sheet as much as other players do, but he's smart, a high IQ veteran player who gives you great defense as a small forward and was great for the Bulls in that starting role when Markkanen was injured. And then finally, the other starting lineup I saw a few of you guys mention in the comments is having Troy Brown Jr. actually start as the small forward and either move Patrick Williams to power forward or potentially even have Theis start at the 4, giving the starting unit even more defense with, again, Troy Brown Jr. and Theis Young. In theory, I like this lineup scenario as well, but I would prefer to have someone like Garrett Temple or Thad start to give the starters a little more veteran experience and leadership. I really like Troy Brown from what we've seen thus far and think he could potentially be a huge steal in this trade that was made, but he's only 21 years old, has played somewhat limited minutes in his NBA career. I would prefer to see him come off the bench for a while and help out the second unit and bringing that defensive energy, and then even moving Garrett Temple and Theis to the starting lineup, I think would also be a mistake, as I would like to at least have one of those guys coming off the bench and leading the second unit. So I think it would be critical to ensure that either Theis Young or Garrett Temple, one of those guys is either in the starting lineup or coming off the bench, just as that veteran leadership presence in each of those units. I did also see some of you comment that Daniel Theis should start at the 4, but no, I think he would be better coming off the bench at the 5. He's more of a player that thrives on, being able to come in, providing strong defense and effort, energy, and protecting the rim. I'm not sure he would thrive in a starting role, which I know he was a starter for the Celtics for a period of time, but I think it would be another similar Daniel Gafford type situation in which he just, wasn't successful when brought in as a starting center when Wendell Carter Jr. was injured, compared to the energy and toughness that he brought off the bench. I will say I am super excited about Daniel Theis joining the team. Casey Johnson did an interview with Theis yesterday before the Bulls practice, and Theis mentioned in a quote, I want to do the same things I did for the Celtics, be a defensive anchor, put my body in there, protect the paint, protect the rim, be loud, communicate. That's my type of player. It reminds me a little like Joakim Noah. I'm not saying he's the same player as Noah, not at all, but that energy and toughness and wanting to do whatever he can to help the team, being an energizer on defense. I would love to hear what you guys think though. Which starting lineup scenario makes the most sense for the Bulls for them to be successful in winning consistently for the remainder of the season and securing a playoff spot, not even just securing a playoff spot, but also to show up to the rest of the league as a team that is up and coming and having the Bulls be an attractive free agency destination, because the Bulls still have work to do in making this team better. We know that Arturas isn't done. Even he himself has said that. So it's not just for this season, but also for continuing to build going forward as the team heads into the offseason and bringing more quality players. So let me know what you guys think in the comments. Don't forget, the Bulls will be taking on the Warriors later this evening. I'll have a live group chat as always for that game, both here on the channel and on the Discord. Be sure to subscribe if you're a Bulls fan, as I post daily Bulls content. Thanks again for tuning in, guys, as always, and I will catch you in the next one.